Number 10 reveals their true colors. As we work towards building up to the X-Men event 10 of Swords, we learned a little bit more about Apocalypse's history, and the old mutant world, as well as his royal family whom he had left behind in Arakko, a long time ago. Summoner arrived in Dawn of X and revealed himself to be Apocalypse's grandson, the son of his daughter, War. Summoner claimed that they needed to create a gate that would take them back to Arakko, and we learned that Apocalypse's presence in the Excalibur series had kind of been all about that for him. But the most shocking moment didn't come from Apocalypse himself, but from Summoner, who revealed that they were not indeed on the side of the mutants, and that their true plot was to lay a trap for their mutant grandfather and those fellow citizens of the mutant nation of Krakoa. Apocalypse ended up almost dying, while the mutant Rockslide Santo Vaccaro actually did lose his life and was even unable to be properly resurrected due to the nature of his death. Number 9 kills Robin. Anytime a Robin dies, it's pretty traumatic, whether we're talking about Stephanie Brown being killed by Black Mask or Jason Todd being beaten to death and then blown up by the Joker. However, the first time these things happen tend to be the most shocking and most iconic, making Jason Todd's death just that more startling when it happened in Death in the Family. Despite the fact that there was a poll in place for people to vote on whether or not Jason lived, most wrote off the poll as not really mattering and being more of a gimmick than something that would actually affect the story. So everyone was exceedingly shocked when Jason Todd was killed off as a result of people voting for that to be the story's ending, even though, we all knew that was probably gonna be the story's ending, because you probably voted for that, but whatever, I guess. Still shocking. And before we get to this next point, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and watching this video. If you could, it would help us out a ton if you click that subscribe and click the like on this video. It really does help us out and we do appreciate it. Number 8 Dr. Manhattan's power. Batman Who Laughs is still a relatively new villain in comic history, but he quickly rose in popularity since his introduction. And he continues to not only rise in terms of his ever-expanding fan base, but also in terms of his power level. He was originally allied with Barbatos and then Perpetua. Currently, the Batman Who Laughs proved his mettle in a battle against Apex Lex and has the powers of Dr. Manhattan, which he stole. Yeah, he stole those powers. It's nuts. And while he is a villain who, we expect to do all sorts of crazy things like stealing Dr. Manhattan's powers, the Batman Who Laughs still manages to surprise those of us who are already expecting a surprise from him in the comics with his diabolical and most devious plots. You can just never follow him. You're like, he's probably gonna, oh, and then he did something else. Okay then.
Number 7. Torturing Tim Drake. I'll begin with how I peeled back the layers of the boy's mind. Joker says in the Batman Beyond Return of the Joker animated film created by Tim and Paul Dini. We see the Joker and Harley kidnap Robin. How did this happen? Well, Tim Drake was out one night patrolling the streets by himself, just getting it done, and then all of a sudden he has to save a lady from 2 thugs. No problem, 2 thugs? Easy. Turns out this was all a setup, classic Joker, and it worked. The Joker trapped him and took him to Arkham Asylum, where he used shock therapy and serums, anything to break him down. He straight up tortured him for like weeks at a time. He was brainwashed until he eventually gave up all these secrets about Batman, and they end up turning him into a mini Joker, giving him the appropriate name of Joker Jr., little JJ.
You've lost, Batman.
Number 6. Joker kills the audience. This moment also mirrors what happened in the finale of the Todd Phillips Joker movie, so I gotta bring it up. It's like 2 birds, 1 stone, bam bam. So in Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2, Joker is invited on a talk show to get some insight behind his madness, which is always a great idea. Let's bring those people around. Ellen, like, hey, check under your seats, it's a knife. No. So stupid. After being asked by the host why he kills people, Joker explains how he's going to kill everybody in the room. And cue the panic laughs. What did he say? So Joker begins to explain that he thinks he's Batman's psychotic obsession. And then after asking about the lovely mugs that guests get to drink from on the show, the Joker then breaks the mug and then stabs Dr. Bartholomew in the neck, who was aiding Joker for this interview. Yeah, not so cured after all, I guess. And then if that wasn't bad enough, he then murdered the entire audience with a poisonous gas.
Adam is a patient.
Do guests get to keep these?
Sure, you do whatever you want with it. We got a closet full of them.
So similar in nature, yet I feel like this is worse. I don't know, like everyone else dying and getting poisoned, it's crazy. I also feel like Joaquin Phoenix is more awkward on a talk show than the Joker. I mean, watch any interview with him and you'll be like, no, for sure, definitely. Number 5, Emperor Joker. So this is a form of the Joker that is bigger and badder than ever. And it comes from Superman Emperor Joker back in 2000. And it was a 9-issue crossover event that shows what happens when the Joker steals the powers of Mr. Mxyzptlk, which is spelled so differently. I had to like write it in like, you know, a dictionary where it like breaks it down. Mr. Mxyzptlk. Yeah, he was supposed to get only 1% of his reality warping power, but he ended up tricking him into giving the Joker 99.9% power. Oops! So what happens when an imp from a 5th dimension accidentally makes Gotham's worst a god? Well, he eats China. That's a body count that's over 1 billion right there. I mean, the Joker transformed reality into this horrible version that better suited himself, where everybody's stuck in an awful loop. He kills Lex Luthor over and over again, and of course he makes Batman suffer death daily. Number 4, Harley Quinn. Making her first appearance in Batman Adventures issue 12, Harleen Quinzel, Adele Dazeem. Most commonly seen as the Joker's love life and twisted partner in crime, started off as an intern psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum. And then in the 1994 graphic novel, The Batman Adventures Mad Love, I don't know why I did that, Mad Love, we see Harleen's origin play out. So Dr. Harleen Frances Quinzel started to fall in love with the Madman as the days went by, because of course. It's an amazing graphic novel. It actually won the Eisner and Harvey Awards for Best Single Issue Comic of the Year. So if you haven't read it, check it out, it's great. She becomes intrigued with how the Joker's mind works, so she volunteers to help treat him. Now, after helping him escape numerous times, it's no surprise she became his sidekick, donning a jester suit of her own. And I like where they're going with Birds of Prey, giving her more of the spotlight rather than just this crazy sidekick to the Joker. And also, if I see any more of Jared Leto's Joker, I'm gonna bleach my eyes. That damaged tattoo on his forehead almost got the next spot on this list, I swear. Number 3, Barbara Gordon. This next one hurts me to talk about. Here we go. So The Killing Joke was brought to us by Alan Moore back in 1988, and since its debut, it's referred to as one of the best graphic novels ever published. Fair. So we have this background story for the Joker unfold as he torments the Gordon family, and then it comes down to a few knocks on the door that changes Barbara's life forever. So she thinks that it's Colleen arriving early, and then she goes over slowly, and then does that thing in horror movies, you know, where they open the door mid-conversation, not aware, and then they turn last second, and then bam! This happens.
Yeah, well, I had some really interesting nightmares.
The animated movie didn't get the same raving reviews as the novel, and most reviewers agree that the movie built up all this backstory for Barbara just to be a plot device for Bruce's story. Yeah, she gets sacrificed in order for Batman to grow. Like, nobody was ever doubting the Joker would do something like this. I mean, guy eats China. So fans almost write the first 30 minutes off of what's otherwise a pretty solid time, with the likes of Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill voicing this adaptation. Number 2, beat Jason Todd. A Death in the Family, not to be confused with A Death of the Family, is a 4-part storyline written by Jim Starlin and published in 1988. Now, this was a huge moment in the Bat story because we see the Joker beat the second coming of Robin, Jason Todd, like to death. This actually came to life thanks to the producers allowing the readers to decide what happens next to the Boy Wonder. And they chose death. He beat him with a crowbar and then a bomb ended it all. Like the Joker used Jason's mother, he blackmailed her and then used her to get to Jason and then killed her off too. So dark. What's even crazier about this whole thing is that it was up to the fans to decide his fate. There was a 36-hour period from September 16th to 17th in 1988, and there was a number you could call in and vote if you wanted the Joker to kill Robin or not. That's like the weirdest reality show ever. Like dialing one number meant death, dialing the other meant survival. And it got really close too. It was almost like 50-50. God, I wish callers had to talk to somebody instead of just calling a number. That would be amazing. Yeah, hi. You know what? Death. I think, oh wait, no, death, for sure death. Thanks, awesome, sick, cheers. So one caller actually admitted to dialing the number numerous times just to put the nail in the coffin for the Boy Wonder. Yep, it worked. Hope you're happy. Hope you're 90 years old and also happy. And finally, number 1, killed Jim Gordon's wife. Yes, this next one takes place during the holidays, so how fitting and joyous. Making her first appearance in Batman 405, the Year One storyline, we find Sarah Essen, Lieutenant Gordon's partner. So after Gordon's divorce, the two of them started to date and eventually they got married. Classic detective stuff. This all sounds lovely so far, but then in Detective Comics 741, we find the Joker after he's kidnapped like dozens of babies. Like I'm talking, this guy kidnapped a bunch of babies and then decided to hide them right in the basement of the Gotham police station, which in my opinion is the worst place to hide anything ever. End of story. So Sarah hears over the radio, Joker has the babies at Central, and she's like, what the f? And then she gets out of there, and then we see him in there talking to one of these babies while he's holding it, saying sweet things, you know, like how life is the biggest joke of all. Sweet things like that. So Sarah makes a loud entrance, tells the Joker to freeze, and Joker tosses the baby at her like hot potato. He tosses an infant, and then Sarah catches the baby, thank God, but then Joker wishes her a Merry Christmas and delivers, bow, a fatal bullet. But the baby's okay, but Sarah, not okay.
Number 10, great world leader. Dr. Doom is known for being one of the most loved of all the most vile villains around. Despite the fact that he's evil and egotistical, fans still seem to enjoy rooting for him, even if they know he's up to no good. And he usually is, up to no good I mean. Usually Doom finds his often elaborate plots foiled by the Fantastic Four or the various other heroes he comes up against. But one time he actually succeeded in ruling the world using the powers of the Purple Man, whom he trapped in a psycho prism. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of this deed. The most shocking part was that he was actually a really good ruler and the world flourished while under his complete control. In fact, everything was going so well that Doom became bored of it and gave up his dream of ruling the world, leaving just as the heroes had managed to break free of his mind control over them and showed up to stop him. Only to find there was no one to stop because Doom didn't like the fact that there was no challenge, no one vehemently opposing him. Number 9, created life. This was shocking because it kind of went against everything we've known this villain to be. Galactus is more of an unstoppable constant cosmic force than a traditional ill-intentioned supervillain. We always expect him therefore to continue doing what he does best, devouring worlds, as we've known him to do pretty much forever. However, this all changed when the heroes attempted to destroy him once and for all in 2015 in the comics. They put him back in the incubator he'd emerged from during the Big Bang, but something unexpected happened. Instead of being destroyed, he was reborn as Galactus the Lifebringer, and went on a mission to create life instead of destroying it. Number 8, Apocalypse joining Krakoa. I mean, all of the mutant villains joining Krakoa were pretty memorable, but especially Apocalypse. When he decided to stand with the heroes he had opposed for years, in essence becoming one of them for the greater good of mutant kind, it was a moment in the comics where I audibly gasped. Seeing him and so many other villainous mutants like Mr. Sinister emerge from that Krakoan gate, ready to pledge to follow the nation's rules and stand beside mutants who for years they had previously tormented and opposed, was just awe-inspiring. I love it, and yet I don't think any of us originally saw that coming. Villains choosing to stand beside heroes in order to forge a new mutant nation. Of course, given Apocalypse's backstory and the relationship between Krakoa and Arakko, I suppose we should be much less shocked now. Number 7, Adamantium go bye-bye. Bye-bye Adamantium, there you go. Gone. One of the most brutal things to happen to Wolverine in the comics as a result of the mutant villain Magneto, who now honestly is more hero than villain in the comics. However, at the time, Magneto ended up pushing the X-Men to a breaking point when he used his powers as the Master of Magnetism to pull all the adamantium out of Wolverine's body. Miraculously, Wolverine managed to survive the de-adamantizing process, but it cost him his nose and his wits as he became more and more animalistic. De-adamantizing, yeah, that's a word now, friends. I just made it a thing. Eventually, Wolverine would get his adamantium back, but the moment where it was taken was quite brutal. Number 6, breaks a back. One of the most shocking moments in comic book history comes from the Batman story Nightfall. In issue 497, in a story aptly titled The Broken Bat, Bane finally managed to defeat the undefeatable Caped Crusader. Batman was run down from working overtime when it came to being faced with all of Gotham's villains in one night. Bane took advantage of this and managed to break Batman's back over his knee, meaning that for a time, Batman had to retire while he healed. And at the time, many actually wondered if Batman would ever fully heal and return again. I mean, he just had his back broken. Most people don't, have their backs broken and then are just like, oh yeah, I'm fine, it's great. So this was a very startling plot point in and of itself to happen, and an astonishing victory for Bane, making him one of the most revered Batman villains to this day. Number 5, helped heal Batman's trauma. During the Three Jokers comic, we learn of a dastardly plot wherein the three Jokers that we know to exist are seeking to create a new Joker to take over for them in tormenting Batman. Or to join them in tormenting Batman? It's a little unclear. Someone more inspired, basically, is what they're looking for. We later learn, however, that this is not the true plot at hand. Instead, it is revealed that this was all a part of one of the three Jokers' master plan to eliminate the other Jokers, so only he will remain, while at the same time helping to heal Batman of his traumatic past by giving him the opportunity to confront, save, and eventually forgive Joe Chill, the man responsible for killing his parents all those years ago. This plot obviously caught many of us off guard and left us flabbergasted by the end of the 3-issue series, as it is revealed the Joker did all this to help Batman heal so that he could claim the title of causing Batman the most trauma. It's just so twisted. It's perfect, but it's also so twisted. It's something most readers didn't see coming. That's why it's so perfect. Number 4. Monty. In Brian Azzarello's graphic novel Joker, we see just how twisted the Joker appears to his own people, the criminal crew that often work for him. We see him through the average criminal Joe eyes of Johnny Frost. Johnny becomes the Joker's driver and later confidant of sorts. When the Joker gets out of Arkham Asylum, Johnny is the one to pick him up and ends up taking him back to a club, eventually the Grin and Barrett, where Harley Quinn is stripping. Joker is not impressed by this and blames Monty, the club owner, who is also kind of supposed to be his friend, but is definitely terrified of him. As such, he and Harley take Monty to the back and skin him alive before ordering him to go out skinless and dance, paying him for his efforts. The other thing that's really terrible about that story is that Joker borrowed that dollar from Monty that he slapped on his skinless bottom after, so that's also really messed up. Obviously, Monty doesn't make it far during that skinless dance before he dies, but the whole scene in graphic novel really is just quite shocking. The whole thing is shocking. Number 3. Teamed up with Porky Pig. There are a whole series of bizarre but kinda great Looney Tunes and supervillain team-ups at DC because Warner Brothers. But the one I'm focusing on here is the team-up between Lex Luthor and Porky Pig. Porky Pig was really down in his dumps at the beginning of this issue, like deep down in his dumps. The beginning of the issue starts with Porky considering taking his own life, so it's really dark. But everything gets turned around when, while working at Lex's corporation, he is acknowledged by the big boss himself. Porky is lifted up by Lex and as a result teams up with him to help him promote his newest online service, Lexima. Unfortunately, this is also part of Lex's plan to use the naive Porky as a scapegoat later down the line, which Porky only learns after it's too late. Hearing of a Lex team up with Porky Pig is one of the most shocking things I've heard of when it comes to villain stories, but oddly enough, all these stories are also pretty well executed, so it's shocking, but it's also great. Number 2. Eats a Baby. What kind of messed up universe did this happen in, you might wonder? Why, none other than Dynamite's The Boys, of course. Although you might not expect that world to be as shocking anymore simply because you're just always expecting to be shocked. There are still those moments that, well, they manage to surprise you, like when we see Homelander eat a baby. Although that wasn't actually Homelander, it was Black Noir posing as Homelander. Black Noir in the comic series is a clone of Homelander who was created to be a failsafe to replace Homelander if he went off the rails. But when Black Noir never gets the order to take out Homelander and replace him, it drives him insane, and so he decides to dress up as Homelander and commit all kinds of unspeakable acts in the hopes that it'll be enough for Vought to give him the kill order that he so desires so he can finally take Homelander's place. Though if you've watched the Amazon Prime show, we still don't know who Black Noir is, so this could be a thing that comes in, could be not. I think the series is gonna go somewhere else personally. Either way, a baby was eaten in the comic series, and that is just still shocking to me, even though it's The Boys and I should expect it. Number 1. Making a supervillain. Injustice was filled with shocking moments, although one of the biggest was the moment that kicked off the whole splitting of this very different reality from the history of the main continuity. In Injustice, the Joker came up with a perfect plan to corrupt one of his foes, and in so doing pretty much mess with his biggest enemy, Batman. This time around, Joker wasn't trying to harm the loved ones of Bruce Wayne, but Kal-El, Clark Kent, Superman. The Joker kidnapped Lois Lane, who we had just learned was pregnant with Superman's child. When Superman rushed to save her, he was faced with Doomsday, who he fought furiously, eventually taking Doomsday up to space in order to defeat him. Alas, it wasn't actually Doomsday that Superman had been fighting. He noticed 2 heartbeats fading and realized Joker had actually tricked him into somehow hallucinating that Lois herself had appeared as Doomsday. Oh no! So Superman killed Lois Lane and his unborn child. It was this shocking act that would lead Superman to murder the Joker and become the supervillain version of himself in this alternate reality story. Number 10 made the Thing a villain. Way back when, in his classic villain days, where many of Dr. Doom's plots were overly elaborate and therefore somewhat ridiculous, he created a time paradox when he forced the Fantastic Four to go back in time to retrieve Blackbeard's treasure. In so doing, he and the Fantastic Four team in essence created the dread Blackbeard, which it turned out was actually none other than Ben Grimm. In other words, Pirate Blackbeard would have never existed if not for Dr. Doom and the FF. So one, he not only created the legend of a rather cruel and vicious pirate, but he also made one of Marvel's biggest softies take on that role. Poor Ben. Number 9. Doombots. Dr. Doom has committed enough atrocious acts just as himself, it's true. But then you also factor in all the deeds his Doombots have done as well. There have actually been many instances that we've thought Doom himself was responsible for various villainous acts, only to find out that we were fooled by Dr. Doom and that this was actually a Doombot disguised as him. There have also been many instances where we've thought Doom had died as well, only to find out that it was just a Doombot who had perished. Still, although passionate fans will be quick to point out instances in the comics where that Doom was actually a Doombot posing as the real deal, the truth remains that as the creator of Doombots, Dr. Doom is still technically responsible for all of their villainous and in some rare cases, good acts. Very rare that they're good. Number 8. Mind-controlled dragon tattoos. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Victor Von Doom's alternate counterpart, Victor Van Dame, ended up using dragon tattoos to mind-control those who joined his micronation known as the Free Zone in Denmark. In reality, those who joined the rent-free shanty town were not actually as free as they thought. In exchange for free living, those who joined Van Dame's Free Zone were asked to get dragon tattoos. Now, these tattoos allowed Van Dame to control the citizens as the microfibers in the tattoo interfaced with the wearer's brain. Number 7. Through a baby. This was mostly shocking in terms of how twisted it was. For this feat, Joker managed to defeat Gordon's new wife, Sarah, using a baby. Well, a baby and a gun. Joker had kidnapped the babies of Gotham, and Sarah Essen Gordon, who was also a capable cop, had managed to track him and the babies down. She had her gun locked on the Joker but was unable to take him out because he was holding one of the infants. He then disarmed her by throwing the baby at her, which caused her to drop her gun so she could catch that baby, leaving her unarmed and making it easy for Joker to shoot and kill her. Basically, all to get back at Commissioner Gordon, who actually had to hold himself back afterward. The death of Sarah pushed Jim to the point that he was ready to kill the Joker. Pushing Jim's buttons is the sole reason, it seems, why the Joker often tortures the women who are close to him. Number 6. Torturing Barbara Gordon and her mom. When it comes to the shocking atrocities the Joker has committed, paralyzing and assaulting Barbara Gordon is likely very high on that list for most of us. But it's not the only time he's caused Batgirl a ton of grief, though the events of the Killing Joke are some of the most disturbingly memorable. The Joker also once kidnapped both Barbara and her mother and threatened to kill Bab's mom if she didn't marry him. Wow, that's pretty awful. The Joker really seems to have a thing for hurting any of the women belonging to the Gordon family. Number 5. Diner Massacre. When it comes to gruesome acts that supervillains have committed, one of the most shocking and traumatizing to read is the massacre that Dr. Destiny created in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. What's more shocking is it all took place because Dee was bored, and this was his way of staying entertained and having fun. It took place at a 24-hour diner, and it involved the patrons and staff there who found themselves trapped and shackled to Destiny's will as he wielded Dream's Dreamstone. Using that ruby, he made those in the diner get intimate, fight one another, torture each other, eat one another, and eventually brought them all to a twisted and bloody end all their own. By the time Dream arrived, all of his victims were dead, and the diner was covered in body parts and drenched in blood from everything that had happened over the past 24-hour period, where Dr. D kept them trapped there and held them as his manipulated and therefore seemingly willing prisoners. Number 4. Lex for President. One of the most shocking moments for me in the comics was when Lex Luthor was actually elected to become President of the United States. What's more, he actually didn't have a terrible platform? President Luthor got elected after promising to ban fossil fuels, and after highlighting the previous administration's failings when he stepped in to help solve the problem of Gotham following their suffering of an earthquake and resulting chaos in the No Man's Land story arc. Eventually, Batman and Superman managed to expose President Luthor as the villain he truly was, acquiring a recording of him making an arms deal with Darkseid. Yeah. Not a good move there, President Lex. This also wasn't the only time we've seen Luthor be elected as President of the USA. It also happened in Mark Millar's Red Sun story and in the Justice Lord's alternate universe from the Justice League animated series. Number 3 made their sworn enemy kill their own son. One of the most shocking revelations in comics was following a tragic scene where Wolverine was forced to kill his own son, Daken, who he believed posed too great a threat if left to live. He fought against Daken and eventually drowned him in a puddle, killing him. This scene was made even more heartbreaking through Wolverine's inner monologue, where we see Logan imagining what a normal life with his son and wife would have been like had Itsu not been killed and they hadn't all been separated. After Daken is dead and Wolverine cradles his body in his arms, Sabretooth shows up and confesses that Logan killing Daken was all part of his master plan, and that he had actually manipulated both of them into this final fight, knowing Wolverine would kill Daken and then be left haunted by the memory of doing so for the rest of his life. Number 2, pretty much everything Kilgrave does. Whether we're talking about the comics or the Jessica Jones live action series, pretty much every villainous deed Kilgrave has ever committed has been shocking. He kidnapped and assaulted Jessica Jones back when she was Jewel, and later on sent her to kill other heroes and friends when he sent her back to the Avengers Mansion. In Jessica Jones' series, many moments come to mind as being some of the most shocking, but one that still haunts me is when the Purple Man, played by David Tennant in the show, threatens his father by forcing him to slowly lower his hand into a pulsing blender. Then, of course, there was the moment that Jessica managed to save Hope early on in the show, only to discover that Kilgrave had planned for that to happen, and that the reason Hope had fought hard to stay with Kilgrave is because he had commanded her to kill her parents when she was reunited with them, which I actually had to pause that show and take a break because I was so shocked. Number 1 had a slice of pie. This one didn't affect the entire world or anything like that, but it did turn an innocent moment into one of the most shockingly sinister ones ever that I've read. In the Umbrella Academy series, we meet Hazel and Cha-Cha, time-traveling assassins. Our introduction to these villains in the quite unorthodox superhero story involves them eating apple pie while in their bear and dog masks respectively. They ask the server at the diner they are eating at what the secret recipe is, and overhearing their compliments, the chef comes out to share that others have traveled from far away and offered him great sums of money to get that secret, but that he joked in the past, "You'd have to chop off my arms and legs to get that secret out of me." The next scene features a bloody Hazel and Cha-Cha, who we later learn have been busy chopping off the chef's limbs. Oh yeah, they also become so distracted by a call from their boss that when the chef actually reveals that canned apples are his secret in that apple pie, they have no idea what he's talking about anymore. Mostly they just really like torturing people. And I guess a good apple pie. Who doesn't like a good apple pie? Number 10, lied. Now, this isn't always entirely Homelander's fault in the streaming series, except for when, it is. Homelander makes a lot of public speeches in the show, and in almost every single one, he's trying to sway the public to be on his and Vought's side, and as such is lying through his teeth. Now, Vought is also equally responsible for doing this, of course. Both Madeline Stillwell and Seth Edgar, as well as all of Vought as a company, are just as responsible for lying en masse to the public and keeping secrets. So at least Homelander isn't alone in this terrible thing, but then again, sometimes his lies make things even worse, not just for the company, but for innocent people. These lies also aren't always just bad because the public has eaten them up, but Homelander also has a habit of lying and reading the room so poorly at times that he actually gets himself in trouble with his own words and actions. In fact, making the public angry with him and risking him exploding at them. It's very tense to watch sometimes. Like that moment in season 2 where we see Homelander contemplate kind of throwing his entire reputation out the window. He's like, I could listen to you or I could kill everyone. What should I do? Number 9, expressed himself. At the end of season 2 of The Boys Amazon Prime show, we're treated to a scene that apparently was actually meant for season 1, but ended up on the cutting room floor for that season. Thankfully, we got it in season 2. Woohoo! It shows Homelander taking some me time. He stands on the roof of what appears to be Vought Tower looking down at the night-lit city, as he treats himself to some very intimate me time. He grunts out, "I can do whatever the fuck I want." And then we see that he is pantless, and it is implied that he expressed himself all over the city. You know, sometimes you just need to express yourself, but you know, ideally not all over the city. Very rude. Now before we move on to this next point, if you're enjoying this video, be sure to show us by giving this video a like and smashing that subscribe button if you haven't already. It truly does help us out, and thank you so much for all of your support. Number 8. Queen Maeve. The whole relationship that Homelander has with Queen Maeve is pretty messed up. And this goes for both the show and the comics. In the comics, the two are in a relationship that is intensely one-sided. Maeve is actually in love with Homelander, but he doesn't really care at all about her. At one point, he tricks her into sleeping with Black Noir, which is a huge part of the reason that Maeve herself becomes so callous and cold-hearted. In the show, he terrifies her to the point that she feels it is unsafe to share her relationship with Elena. Homelander is extremely controlling, which almost always leaves Maeve feeling too terrified to ever stand up to him in the Amazon Prime series. Almost anyways. Number 7. Tortured the Fantastic Four family, including their son Franklin. And this is when he was just a little kid, by the way. Poor little Franklin. Of course, Franklin Richards is a super powerful mutant in the world of the comics, but when faced with a horde of demons, it became frighteningly clear both how horrified he was and how innocent and vulnerable Franklin still was as a child. This experience left Franklin traumatized even after the Fantastic Four family managed to escape their fate. Dr. Doom sent Franklin to hell while torturing every other member of the Fantastic Four. He forced the Thing to fight endless losing battles, set fire to Sue Richards, trapped Reed in a room filled with magic from which he could not escape, and gave the Human Torch Mr. Fantastic's powers, and then proceeded to use those stretching powers to tie him into a knotted monstrosity. Number 6. His relationship with Scarlet Witch. This was just a weird and convoluted story in general, but basically Dr. Doom managed to wipe Wanda Maximoff's memories, and then she fell in love with him, and they were to be married. She didn't know who she was until Wiccan showed up and reminded her of her origin story and her family. Eventually Wanda put 2 and 2 together and figured out that Doom was manipulating her due to the fact that he seemed so concerned with her actually believing Wiccan's story. What's up with that, Doom? Doom also claimed to be doing everything out of concern for protecting the world from Scarlet Witch's unpredictable and unstoppable reality warping powers, and for his real and true love of Wanda. He really loved her, so he claimed. However, he later revealed himself to be a man obsessed with only power when Wanda transferred her reality warping power of the Life Force to him, and he went all crazy. He also claimed to be responsible for the death of the Avengers and mass extinction of the mutants. He was like, "That wasn't Wanda, that was me." Wait, what? Number 5. Sacrificed his first love for sweet armor. Dr. Doom's inspiration for the name he gave his goddaughter Sue and Reed Richards' little baby girl Valeria came from his first love, a love that later returned to his life and who he learned was the only woman he had ever really loved. So he claimed. When she did return, however, it was revealed that Dr. Doom had ulterior motives for his oldest and truest love. He didn't want to be with her, not in a traditional sense anyways. He wanted to sacrifice her life and her soul in order to earn himself some powerful mystical armor. Readers watched as Valeria's skin burned away and her flesh was remade into Doom's shiny new armor. Number 4. Battleworld. Following the incursions, Dr. Doom was turned into God Emperor Doom when worlds collided and were destroyed, prompting Doom to use newly acquired reality warping powers and sort of reality mending powers to create his own universe. This universe would become known as Doom's Battleworld, a patched together combination of the broken Marvel realities. Doom himself became a god to all the heroes and citizens who lived there. He had his own army of Thors at his disposal, making Doctor Strange his deputy and turning Sue Storm into his consort. When Reed Richards finally managed to return and find Doom, he made Doom confess that Richards would have actually built a better world, and after fighting, Doom relinquished the power he'd used to Reed, who set out to actually remake the Marvelverse and most of its alternate realities once more, with only a few tweaks for improvements here and there. Number 3. Droit de Seigneur. While some may praise Dr. Doom for being a great ruler who brought prosperity to Latveria, we also need to acknowledge that he also snatches many of his people's rights and freedoms away in being their governing monarch and ruler. This was showcased when Dr. Doom exercised his right of droit de seigneur, marching into one of his faithful peasant Klaus's home on his wedding night, and insisting that he be allowed to sleep with his bride Gretchen. While Klaus seems awkwardly accommodating, Gretchen appears downright shocked, upset, and possibly pissed off, and rightfully so. Also, yeah, Dr. Doom's Latveria still has a peasant class, so it isn't always depicted as being that great, as if it was, why do you have peasants? What's up with that? Number 2. Dictatorship dependency. This is what Dr. Doom has created for Latveria, the nation he rules. While Latveria is considered a peaceful place with virtually no crime, nor problems of poverty or hunger harming its citizens, who do genuinely seem to worship and love their ruler, Victor Von Doom, it's also a place that has become so dependent on his leadership that anytime he leaves, it basically breaks. Meaning that if there ever comes a time when Doom must leave permanently or finally dies for good, Latveria's economy will collapse and the nation will quickly devolve into chaos and ruin. We've seen what has happened to Latveria before in the comics when Doom has ceased being its ruler, and it's truly never good for the nation. Number 1. Got bored of ruling the world. Remember that time Victor Von Doom took control of the Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, by trapping him in a psychoprism and used his focused powers by putting them in a gem, which he used to control the world? Now, you might think that sounds like the worst part of the story, Doom ruling the world, but in a strange twist, it actually wasn't. Using mind control, of course, is not really a heroic act, but in doing so, Dr. Doom was able to create peace on Earth. All wars ceased, no one went hungry, the global economy prospered under his rule. However, with no one to challenge him, Doom became bored. So he abandoned ruling the world just as the heroes rushed in to stop him, freeing the world, but in doing so also returning it to a state of disorder and chaos, which may have been the real crime in this story. Just Doom being like, I don't want to rule anymore, and we're all like, but wait, you were actually good at it. You had to use mind control, but still. Number 10. Formed the Avengers. If you thought Nick Fury brought the Avengers together, then you might be surprised to hear this. In the comics, however, it was not Fury's plot that brought all of Earth's mightiest heroes together, but Loki's. Granted, Loki hadn't planned on doing so, and in the end it actually resulted in way more trouble for him and many other villains in the Marvel-verse besides than he could have ever imagined. Loki was the first villain the team would come up against in Avengers issue number 1, and the villain who would unite them together, much like in the MCU actually, but with less scepters and invasions and with more tricks and illusions and like magic. Loki tricked the Hulk into destroying a train track, thereby endangering human lives. And although no one was hurt because the Hulk actually saved everyone from his own breaking of the train track, the people still saw the Hulk as a monster, and it was this event that brought the Avengers together. In the end, it was revealed that Loki was behind all of it, and the Avengers ended up uniting to defeat him. So yeah, this was one of the worst things Loki kinda did to himself even. That's super tricksy. Number 9. United Villains. It almost felt like Loki was trying to make up for doing something really good for the heroes in the world, and for, you know, causing a bunch of harmful things for himself when he brought the Avengers together with this plot. During the Acts of Vengeance crossover, Loki, under the guise of a businessman, used his skills as a master manipulator to bring together the Prime Movers, a very contradictory team of powerful villains who all hated the Avengers and heroes in general, and sought to destroy them by attacking them with less conventional villains. The team was made up of Dr. Doom, Kingpin, Mandarin, Wizard, Magneto, and Red Skull, and their plan was actually pretty solid. It sounds like it wouldn't work, but it actually worked pretty well. However, even Loki couldn't manage to keep the group together, and they ended up breaking up, mostly due to everyone's mutual hatred of Red Skull. Which, yeah, I get it. Also, when you put Magneto and Red Skull on a team together, I mean, what do you expect to happen? They're obviously gonna break up. It's a terrible match. Number 8. Thor croaks. Are we going to talk about the frog thing? You bet we're going to talk about the frog thing, because you know, this is a part 1, so we gotta talk about it. One of the most bizarre and yet great schemes Loki has committed to date was when he devised to have Thor turned into a frog in order to get his do-good brother out of the way so that he might rule Asgard in his place. Not only is this awful because you know, turning your brother into a frog is never a nice thing to do, but we aren't just talking about anyone here. This is Thor. The transformation was even worse for the god of thunder, who often prides himself on his prowess and strength as a warrior. As a frog, he was robbed of his natural sense of courage and his eagerness for battle initially, and as Frog Thor, he had to rediscover this before eventually, of course, being returned to his standard form and getting revenge back on Loki, because that's how this always goes, unless we're in like an alternate Earth. Number 7. Ryan. Not only does Homelander come in and try to basically hijack his son, Ryan, for himself, attempting to steal him away from Becca and make him come over to his side of thinking in season 2 of The Boys, but he also pressures his son to be more like him, to the point that he pushes him off of a roof to prove to Ryan that he does in fact have superpowers like his old man. He encourages Ryan to take that leap of faith, ensuring him that if he jumps off, he'll fly. At this point, Homelander doesn't really know for sure that Ryan even has superpowers, as they have yet to manifest, and yet he still pushes Ryan off the roof, hoping to unlock his son's potential. Yeah, he just pushes him off the roof. Ryan, of course, just falls. He does not fly. Fortunately, he is super durable, and we later learn, yes, he does have powers, so he ends up being okay. But what would Homelander have done if he killed his son? If he didn't end up having superpowers? Probably just fly away and not even dwell on it. Ryan probably wouldn't be worthy of being his son if he hadn't demonstrated his heat vision powers later on. He'd be like, I don't really care, he didn't even have powers. Number 6. Makeout session. In season 2, Homelander finds himself with a new superhero girlfriend. The two of them both seem to see all the other criminals and even just regular humans the same, as nothing more than pestilent ants. They both have no value for human life, and during a makeout session that starts when they are both apprehending a criminal, crush said criminal's head with sheer force in the heat of the moment. Ew. Then they make out in it, and I'm like, ah! So gross. Number 5. Stormfront. Speaking of Homelander's lucky lady, his girlfriend was actually Stormfront. In the comics, Stormfront is the leader of a different group of supes, sort of the B-listers to the Seven's A-listers. Stormfront's also a man, and also a former World War II German soldier, who still patiently worships his former leader, Hitler, as though one day he'll somehow return to power. In the show, Stormfront is quite similar to her comic book counterpart, but she uses social media as a mask and as a means of propaganda to gain support, hoping to amass an army she can utilize for her true, much more sinister purpose. Also, she's a woman, so there's that. Homelander doesn't just date her, but he actually stands by her side after learning of her truly alarming origin. Even knowing who she is and what she believes in, he introduces her to his son and fights at her side. Yikes. Although at least he's a little bit like, I feel a little weird about it. Even for me, this is a lot. Number 4. Flight 37. The tragedy of this flight is one that could have easily been prevented in most comic books. But when it comes to the world of the Amazon Prime series The Boys, things don't end up as happily for those aboard Flight 37. This fate of the crew and passengers ends up being a crash landing and death into the ocean. Well, actually, is it into the ocean? No, I think they land on land, but they're flying over the ocean. The fate of the crew and passengers ends up being a crash landing and complete death. Homelander and Queen Maeve arrive in time to stop the terrorists aboard the plane, but the pilots are killed before they can ensure their safety, which prompts Homelander to abandon ship, or in this case, abandon plane. Especially as I'm pretty sure he lasered the actual controls, which is not helpful with his heat vision. It's not good, Homelander, you need to contain that. Homelander then abandons the plane with no parachute required, because he can fly. Queen Maeve insists that they stay and try to help whomever they can, carrying them out. But instead, Homelander pressures Maeve into actually abandoning the plane with him, insisting if they only save a few, then the mission would be considered a failure and a great tragedy. Instead, he orders Maeve to leave with him and tell the press that they actually didn't get there in time to help push for support for a bill that would get supes in with the government and military, which they claim would, help increase their response times. It wouldn't, because they got there in time, they just didn't care. Number 3. Supervillains. Let's not forget that Homelander was also basically the mastermind behind creating super terrorists in the season 1 of the Amazon Prime show, which is pretty terrible. He was the one responsible for leaking Compound V and putting it in the hands of those he knew would want to strike back at the USA. Doing so caused a mass amount of death and destruction, but gave the Vought supes an even greater excuse for needing to exist and gave them them more justification in their campaign towards a bigger position of power when it came to the government. Not only was he attempting to help Vought, a pretty evil corporation, but he also made a big mess of it. He also would not let the term supervillain go, no matter what various focus groups thought of it, in comparison to super terrorist, which Ashley said actually rated much better. But that's how petty he is. He's like, no, it's gotta be supervillains. Number 2, the Vice President. In the comics, Homelander at one point gets together a group of supers who take on the government. When they arrive there, Homelander heads to the White House and kills the Vice President of the United States, Victor E. Newman. You might recognize that name if you're watching the show, who was in the comics the former CEO of Vought. He kills him by decapitating him. He also then defiles his decapitated head. Why does he do this? Mostly because he wanted to prove a point and, well, just because he wanted to. That's one of the things that makes Homelander so awful. He just feels entitled to do whatever the heck he wants because he's so powerful, which makes him pretty much one of the worst supes in the comics, if not the absolute worst. I think in the comics Homelander is the absolute worst. Number 1, his biggest fans. With Flight 37, at least you could try to argue that Homelander felt it wasn't worth saving anyone because, he felt he couldn't save them all. Although it could be argued that he probably could have saved them all by just carrying the plane to safety, which is what some other comic book heroes from Marvel or DC would likely have done. But let's try to just give him the benefit of the doubt for that one and somehow say it was impossible for him to save all of them. If that is the case, then this instance is much worse, because he killed these people intentionally and for no real greater reason other than he just wanted to. At the Believe Expo, Homelander's biggest fans are a family who managed to win a car as well as dinner with Homelander. Homelander decides to fly them around in the car, effortlessly holding it up as he soars through the sky. The family eventually is freezing and is terrified, but tries to pretend, like everything's fine, this is good, we're with our favorite superhero. Homelander is just flying them to dinner, they think, and will be there soon, but Homelander reveals that he doesn't care about the Believe Expo, or the family, or their religion, and that basically this whole thing is a sham. He tells them what he thinks of their beliefs and goes on to say, you may as well have burned your money in regards to the expo costs. And in regards to God, goes on to say, the only man in the sky is me, before letting go of the car and letting it plummet back to Earth and the family to their doom. To Homelander, that would not be a plane, that would be him in the sky. Apparently, since he's the only one. Number 10, rendered Eros powerless. It's got to be hard being the brother to Thanos. Just ask Eros, aka Star Fox, about it, and I'm sure he'll tell you as much. Star Fox is often presented as being a hero in the comics, and yet despite his own reputation trying to do good at least, he has to live in Thanos' shadow. Of course, Eros has done some questionable things in the past as well, but I still can't help but feel a little bad for him. During the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet miniseries, while Thanos threatens Marvel's greatest heroes, Star Fox is taken prisoner by his brother, who basically rendered him powerless and makes him watch as he torments his fellow superhero colleagues and friends, eventually killing many of them. Though of course, they would return. That is what it's like to be the brother to the Mad Titan though. He takes the phrase of sibling rivalry to a whole new level. Number 9, kills his own servants. Thanos is not even above killing those who serve him. He has obviously without much remorse killed his own adopted daughter Gamora before in the comics and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Although it pained him, he also chose to sacrifice Gamora to get his way and complete his plan. The Black Order, however, are not usually people who betray Thanos, unlike his traitorous daughter. They are usually loyal to a fault, having been tested over the years by Thanos and chosen for their strength, ingenuity, and ruthlessness. However, sometimes their own greed for power gets the best of them. Such was the case when Corvus Glaive ruled the Black Quadrant in Thanos' stead and was made to end his own life upon Thanos' return for basically doing so. He was like, I was just keeping the seat warm, and Thanos was like, nah, I don't believe you, you're dead. Before there was the Black Order, by the way, there was the Butcher Squadron as well, a team which Thanos assembled but would actually choose to murder members of at random for his own reasons. Not really a guy you want to serve, I don't think. Number 8, killed his father. Mentor is known in the comics as Thanos' father. Alars, aka Mentor, has felt deep and intense guilt for years over his son's actions. At times, Mentor has even tried to intervene to try and fix the disaster and bloodshed that Thanos has wrought. In the end, Thanos grew sick and was dying from an unknown and seemingly uncurable disease. He turned to his brilliant father, an accomplished scientist, for a cure, after exhausting every other option he could think of. Mentor was forced to help Thanos when he threatened the other scientists' lives and the lives of their families who resided on the moon where Alars was living. When pressed, however, Mentor shared that a cure would take years to find, if there even was one, and that he was happy Thanos was finally dying. He only regretted not killing his son himself years ago. This outburst resulted in Thanos having an outburst of his own, and he murdered his father in response. It's not a great relationship. Number 7 was defeated? But how can this be the worst? Well, because it put Loki in a position of great power, and he would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for his meddling brother Thor. Some theorize that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Loki actually allowed himself to be defeated by the Avengers in that first film. The whole invading Earth wasn't actually something he wanted or needed, but it was actually all part of a grander scheme to get caught and then be put in exactly the place he needed and in fact wanted to be in order for him to later take over Asgard. Of course, we don't know if this is true or if he was really the puppet in an even greater scheme where Thanos was the master the whole time, which does kind of sound more likely, but I like to think that almost everything has been part of Loki's plan, including any deaths he's seemingly suffered, because he's just a master manipulator. Also, all these deaths are all fake, and I don't believe any of them. I see you, Loki. Even that last one. We got that last one, everyone was like, oh, he's definitely dead, and I was like, he'll be back. I don't believe it. And he is back now. Granted, it's a different version of him, but still, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna say, don't believe any of it. Don't believe any deaths. They're all lies. Number 6, impersonated Scarlet Witch. And while impersonating her, also kinda made out with Clint Barton, who was Ronin at the time. In fact, this is one of the things that tipped the heroes off to her true identity, because apparently Clint has some kind of magical kissing power. Wait a minute, that's not Scarlet Witch. I would know her kiss anywhere. Since when did Clint and Wanda make out enough for him to be able to identify her kiss instantly? Also, how different are Loki's and Wanda's kissing styles? I want to know. Like, are they radically different? Are they a little different? What level are we talking about here? Loki's plan here, of course, was to impersonate Wanda so he could help create his own team of Avengers, which he would then use against Norman Osborn. Perhaps he was resentful because he wasn't invited to Osborn's Dark Avengers? How rude. While multiple people were suspicious that it wasn't Wanda, eventually Loki's illusion was broken fully by Wiccan, Wanda's reincarnated, formerly self-constructed son. I hope that makes sense to you. That's what he is, I don't know. Before we move on to the next spot, it's time to do that thing. You know that thing where you click that like button if you are liking this video. Yeah, do the thing. Number 5, betrayed Thor. Was anyone surprised? No, not even Thor was surprised on this one, but it didn't make it any less awful. This moment comes to us from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In Thor Ragnarok, after Loki and Thor finally seem to be willing to put the past behind them and work together for once to save Asgard, Loki decides to betray his brother yet again. He plans to alert the authorities and have Thor captured in exchange for a hefty reward, meaning that Thor would be likely eternally imprisoned and trapped on Sakaar, which would also leave Asgard eternally doomed with Hela in charge. Easier to let it burn, Loki says, before Thor reveals he was expecting the betrayal and tases him remotely. Number 4, tried to fool the X-Men and almost succeeded. During the 80s, Alpha Flight and X-Men had a team-up 2-part story, which of course started with both teams fighting one another, but all due to a greater misunderstanding. And yeah, actually Alpha Flight during the 80s was a big thing. It was huge. We don't talk about Alpha Flight much anymore, but they were a big deal back then. Loki was up to some sneaky business here where he was trying to convince the northern gods that he was, trying to help mortals, that he was a good guy, when really he was trying to create chaos. Surprise, surprise. He had a fire fountain at his disposal, which not only sounds super flashy, but also granted magical clothing and cool powers to mortals, as well as I believe eternal life. The X-Men ended up in the city containing the fire fountain after their plane went down and crash landed. In the end, Alpha Flight Flight, who went to investigate and found them, who had a quick tussle with their friends, who at the time thought the city was great, before Loki revealed himself and the mutants were able to unite to defeat him after learning that the powers, magic clothing, and eternal life granted came with a price. The destruction of magical beings like Alpha Flight member Snowbird. Oh no, Snowbird! Fortunately, Loki was foiled, but this was a pretty diabolical plot. Number 3. Bartered with Enchantress's hand. Not my hand! But also, this is very serious. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's very serious, this is terrible. Loki did this not once even, but twice. Both times Idun was not even consulted, and the second time around, she was full on tricked by Loki. Idun was known as the keeper of golden apples. She is very important to the Asgardian people because of her being the only person who can pick the golden apples, which are what grant the Asgardians their eternal youth and vitality, making them immortal as well. So it's a really important job. The first time, it was Loki who promised, but also managed to avoid Enchantress being married off, but this only resulted in greater trouble for Thor when it was revealed the mason he had bartered with was actually a frost giant in disguise. So he tricked him, and then he kind of had to fight a frost giant. That's where Thor comes in. The second time, he once again promised her hand to a frost giant in order to save his own skin from starvation and from his own banishment. This time around, Thor once again had to save the day, but Idun was still imprisoned for a time and likely traumatized from the whole experience in the end. Number 2. Stole Sif's body. This has to be by far one of the worst things that Loki has done. And what's worse, he did it for the most petty of reasons. Like many of his antics, it was simply to piss off Thor. At first, Thor actually wondered why Loki had returned to life, resurrected in a female form, but Loki played it off as just like, oh, this is just some coincidence, I just happened to be reincarnated in a female body, don't worry about it. Later, however, we'd learn about the horror that Lady Loki really was. Loki in Sif's body, having stolen her body, the body of his enemy, to parade around in and just use as he pleased. Ugh. This also greatly affected Lady Sif even after she had her body back. She remarked how even though she was supposed to be this strong and fearless warrior, she found herself trembling at the slightest unknown shadow, terrified that Loki was lurking around a corner waiting to return and claim her body as his own. Ugh, I don't like that. Number 1. Killed his younger self. Kid Loki was one of the best versions of Loki we'd ever got. And by best, I mean the most honest, the most true, the kindest, the most heroic. He was a trickster, but a seemingly innocent one, a nice one. Kid Loki was on a path of redemption. He was basically a hero, but not even Loki could let Loki redeem himself. Seeing that no one would ever see him as anything other than the god of lies, no matter how much good he did, King Loki took out revenge on everyone around him, eventually even killing his own more naive persona and self, Kid Loki. Or really, more younger Loki at this point. Basically, Kid Loki is like a younger version of King Loki. It's all Loki, but yeah, he killed the nicest Loki. Sad.
Number 10. Batman lost all of his money. In the early days of the Joker War crossover, Joker stole all of Batman's money, an estimated $100 billion. In the process of stealing all Bruce Wayne's money, Joker also brought to light some issues with Batman's bookkeeping, specifically some problems with offshore accounts and dummy corporations, just extra cash he was stashing for Batman stuff, but he can't really tell the world that. Later on in the story, it's revealed that Lucius Fox is basically now in control of Wayne Enterprises, and the company's board even tries to remove Bruce from the company. Totally not a good idea. A similar thing happened in Spider-Man 2 with Oscorp, and the result was Green Goblin. I suppose these guys don't know about that though, because that was in the Marvel Universe. Whether you like the creative decision to mess with Batman's financial situation or not, you gotta admit it's definitely one of the worst things that could happen to a hero.
And before we move on here, guys, don't forget to go ahead and give us a thumbs up because it helps us out so much in the studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for giving that little tap of love. And we'll get on with the list now. Number 9, Spider-Man's identity revealed. If you stuck around until the very end of Spider-Man Far From Home, which you should have if you know any better, you were treated to a lovely little sweet teaser where we see J. Jonah Jameson returned by the amazing J.K. Simmons, but he's coming bearing bad news. He's like this TMZ conspiracy character, more of how he is in the Spider-Man games. He's a bit more hardcore than what we've already seen, and he reveals footage of Mysterio where we see him give a nice little shout out to Spider-Man, this time by his real name, with a cute little pic of Tom Holland to go along with it. Now, this isn't the first time Spider-Man's identity has been revealed out in the public. It actually happens quite a bit. But one notable time from the comics was in the Civil War storyline when Peter is convinced by Tony to reveal his secret identity to support the Superhuman Registration Act, resulting in Aunt May getting shot. Yeah, that's what happens when your biggest, baddest villains learn your last name. You get a lot of trouble coming your way. That's why we do our secret names on the internet.
Number 8, the Hulk, last man on Earth. In Hulk: The End, a one-shot from 2002, we see the Hulk as the last man alive at the end of the Earth. That's definitely gotta be one of the worst things that could happen to anybody, superhero or not. We see Banner wandering the post-apocalyptic wasteland, being followed by a vidbot that records his every move as Banner or as the Hulk. It's super bleak and depressing, watching an old and frail Bruce Banner watch the green sunset every evening and wander the desert. He reviews the vidbot after each transformation, and in one really gruesome part of the story, we see Hulk after having battled a giant swarm of flying cockroaches all melted away, and he's regenerating, but his skin and innards are all melted away and stuff. It's disgusting. Basically, the Hulk is getting attacked by these swarms of bugs that just eat his flesh until they're satisfied. This horrible experience is also pretty much the only thing left for the Hulk to fight against. The story sort of centers around this, with this inner conflict of Bruce Banner wanting to die, but the Hulk just won't let him and can't help wanting to fight. It's really tragic and totally conflicted. Like, man, who would want to be the last man on Earth?
Number 7, killed his mother. He just likes to kill everyone in his family pretty much. Granted, his mother did try to kill him when he was born, so this feels almost somewhat poetic. In the series Thanos Rising, we saw more into Thanos' origins and backstory as a youngster. Here we see him become more and more obsessed with death, specifically Lady Death, starting out with a weak stomach but growing to enjoy murdering animals, other children his age, and eventually killing his own mother, searching for something that would help him find who he was. Oddly enough, he thought killing his mother, Suisan, would make him somehow feel like or become less of a monster? As she had threatened him with a scalpel when he was just a baby, driven mad by his appearance, he also attacked her with one, tying her up and gagging her before cutting her open. Also, what's with that sexy position that she's in when all of that's happening? That's weird. Number 6, child killer. You wouldn't think that Thanos would make a great father, and he doesn't really. But that hasn't stopped him from siring many children throughout the galaxy and adopting others at times. Gamora is his adoptive daughter, but he also has a naturally born son named Thane. In fact, Thanos even attempted to find his son at one point during Infinity. He didn't want to find him to reconnect though, or repair a lost or severed connection. He wanted to find his son in order to kill him. Not knowing where to look, he decided the best course of action was to kill as many children within Thane's possible age group as possible. Thanos disguised this plot as one of conquest, ordering planets to pledge fealty to him and offer a tribute of the heads of their youths between the ages of 16 to 22. Number 5, influences Thane. This doesn't sound so bad as a title for a point, until you realize just what that influence did. Thane was Thanos' son, whose mother had been an Inhuman. Before Thanos showed up, Thane was a healer and didn't know that he was Thanos' son. Thanos, in his hunt to eliminate the child, demanded the heads of Attilans and therefore the Inhumans' children. This ended with a fight where Thanos fought Black Bolt, and Black Bolt detonated a Terrigen bomb. The bomb was so massive it triggered Terrigenesis in all those who had an Inhuman lineage on the planet Earth's surface, including, you guessed it, Thane. Thane's power was death, and he instantly went from trying to save people to basically killing everyone around him in an instant. Pardon my snapping. Completely unaware of what was happening. He later learned of his legacy, and Thanos promised he would kill him. However, Ebony Maw betrayed his master and instead set Thane free and influenced him to accept his destiny and fight his father. Thane did this and won, trapping Thanos. Learning of his heritage and with the influence of the evil Ebony Maw, who was only there due to the fact that he was originally a member of Thanos' Black Order and was originally loyal to him, Thane became a deadly and dangerous villain over time, with power initially rivaling his father's. Number 4. Mass extermination policy. We all know Thanos as someone who is heartless, ruthless, and who kills to get closer to his one true love, Lady Death. And yet there is another reason he sometimes is known as a mass exterminator when it comes to various species and alien worlds. In the 2019 Thanos series, we see him going up against one of his greatest foes, Magus, and we see how he attempts to prevent Magus from expanding his Universal Church of Truth, a much more evil religion than it sounds, let me tell you, by killing everyone, in order to prevent Magus from ever being able to convert them. You can't convert people if they're dead. Well, really joining Magus's church also is not an ideal scenario anyways. Killing them to prevent this is intense and cruel. In truth, Thanos has always enjoyed killing, so to him it's likely like hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. He not only gets to rob Magus of converts, but also gets to revel in death, and also gets closer to Lady Death through killing. Yay! Number 3. Brought peace to the world. If you don't know Cosmic Ghost Rider, here's the abbreviated version of his backstory. He's basically a superpowered Frank Castle from an alternate world where Thanos killed everyone. He is the power cosmic and is also a spirit of vengeance and a Ghost Rider, likely the last one. He's also been around so long and alone for so long that he's pretty mentally unstable. He was one of the last to stand against Thanos, but eventually ended up joining him because there wasn't really anyone else left to fight alongside, and he realized he couldn't beat Thanos at the end of the day. Cosmic Ghost Rider first appeared in 2016's Thanos series and would get a few mini-series of his own thereafter. His self-titled series shows him stealing baby Thanos so that he might raise him to be better, thereby preventing all the death and destruction we've come to know Thanos for. But even with Cosmic Ghost Rider's insane but well-meaning influence, we learn Thanos cannot be fixed. At first, CGR thinks he succeeded, but he later learns when he runs into Thanos from the future that his Punisher Thanos of a son has somehow grown up to be an even worse tyrant than without his influence, proving that even when people try to raise Thanos right and try to prevent him from becoming some crazy tyrant, it will still always end badly. Thanos forcefully brought peace to the world, and when others resisted his rule, he killed those who opposed him and created internment camps to keep the rebels in. Number 2. Sacrifices millions for the love of a lady. In the comics, Thanos merely wielded the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped those out of existence to simply get closer to Lady Death, who he was wooing. That's right, in the comics the snap was simply an attempt to impress his eternal crush. Killing billions just for a chance at love with someone? A chance? That's pretty terrible if you ask me. Number 1. Killed Death. If this feels like a paradox, well, it kind of is. But we need to remember, in the Marvel Universe, for Thanos anyways, death is not just a concept, but is also a person, Lady Death, his love. In an alternate universe, however, Death and Thanos have a different relationship, less of an unrequited love story, as Death is posing as Thanos' mother, until Thanos realizes that Death actually has been lying to him and takes revenge on her by killing her. This doesn't sound so terrible until you realize the ramification of this action, as Thanos does in the story. Basically, killing Death messes with the whole balance of the universe and everything, which, as we've seen in other alternate worlds like the Cancerverse, can be very, very bad. Of course, this doesn't go as terribly as the Cancerverse, as this happens in Earth X, an alternate world known as Earth 9997, and we at least don't have the influence of the many angled ones in this alternate world to worry about.
Number 10. Death of the Family. Written by Scott Snyder, released in 2013, we see the Joker make his return to Gotham City after having his face sliced off. Yeah, the doll maker gave him a facelift of a lifetime, literally, while he was in Arkham Asylum, but it was all part of a plan. Insert link, 25 seconds to 29, all part of the plan. So he busted out, steals his face back from the police, after of course killing several of them, threatens to murder the mayor, kills John Claridge, kidnaps Alfred, all while wearing the horrible reattached baloney Joker face, and then he ends up kidnapping all of the Bat family members. Ooh, so he makes Batman sit at this table with all of them, as it's revealed what's truly for dinner. They open it up and it's their own faces. Yeah, everybody had bags over their heads, and then underneath they were wrapped in bloody bandages, and then their faces were right there. It's a really horrible scene, but fear not, as this was only another cruel joke. Therapy not included. Wow. And before we continue on to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a super thumbs up, that would be great, because it goes a long way for us over here. You're the best, thank you so much. If enough of you like this, they'll let me go home for the holidays. Okay, back to some Joker craziness. Number 9, Batman Endgame. Written by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo in 2014, Batman Endgame is not a time heist. No. It is a 6-issue miniseries where the Joker releases an airborne virus so that every citizen in Gotham turns into these mini Joker maniacs, running around, flipping cars, lighting shit on fire. But no tiki torches though. No tiki torches. I mean, they're not that bad, right? Yeah, you white people. Classic Evil Riot stuff, you know? Now that already sounds bad enough to make the list, but it gets worse. So the Joker also uses this virus to make the Justice League members try and kill Batman. Yeah, making your friends turn against you. That's the worst. So Batman had to use everything he has to fight off his powerful co-workers. And what I love about the Joker / what terrifies me the most about the Joker is how he uses Batman's true identity against him. It's amazing that no matter how many times he does something like this, the stakes are always so high, and it makes you not want to stop reading. And it's resolved with both Batman and Joker having their memories wiped, but those images of Gotham citizens with those horrid smiles drawn across their face, that lives in your head rent-free. Number 8, Joker kills Randall. Okay, I gotta include this one. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix scooped an Oscar for his performance in the 2019 Joker movie, written and directed by comedic all-star Todd Phillips. So we have to talk about some of the crazy key scenes, specifically the way he kills Randall. Spoilers. So we have Arthur Fleck in his apartment. He's getting warm, he's getting his face ready before his big TV gig on the Franklin Murray Show later that night. And then he's joined by his former colleagues, Randall and Gary. So they question his face paint, obviously, by asking if he got a new job or maybe he's planning to go to the rally. And Arthur says, no, his mom died, so he's celebrating. I mean, that's one way of mourning, okay. So Randall asks a few questions about these recent crimes, so Arthur keeps the conversation going a little bit, stalling as he pulls out a knife. And then out of nowhere, he stabs and kills Randall. And the fact that Gary was there like the whole time made us believe nothing bad is gonna happen because Arthur likes Gary. Who doesn't like Gary? He's terrified of what he just saw. He asks Arthur immediately why he just did that. Do you watch the Murray Franklin Show? He responds, yeah, I'm gonna be on it tonight. This scene is just so chilling because he assures Gary so well that he can go free. He even pretends to like lunge at him as he walks by as like a joke. That's how comfortable he is around him. Dude's nuts. Number 7, Barbara Gordon. The Killing Joke, written by Alan Moore, released in 1988, was and still is a fan favorite when it comes to graphic novels. It touches on the background of the Joker while he straight up torments the Gordon family all at the same time. It's a great story. And one of the biggest moments is of course when Barbara Gordon opens the door expecting to see her friend Colleen, when in fact it is a gun-wielding Joker that greets her instead. It's super dark. I mean, she's bound to a wheelchair after this, not to mention the trauma that goes along with it. I can't even imagine. Things started to at least look up for Barbara as she went on to become Oracle, the genius super hacker that kept an eye on Gotham and helped out all the supers, and even at one point became the leader of the Birds of Prey. Ah, we love a comeback story.
Number 6, Wolverine torn in half by the Hulk. This one comes from Wolverine versus Hulk, and it's pretty brutal. In this story, Wolverine is sent off to Tibet to assassinate the Hulk. The only problem being it's the Hulk we're talking about. When the battle between these two rageaholics gets super intense, Hulk picks Wolverine up and literally rips him in two, tossing his lower half up the mountain and leaving Wolverine's torso bleeding in the snow. Being the world's greatest tracker, Wolverine could smell his legs a few miles up the mountain, and he sets off on a long climb to retrieve his lost limbs. What's worse is this series was promptly struck with a delay that lasted forever, leaving poor old Wolverine legless for basically 3 years while we all waited for the next issue to come out.
Number 5, Batman's broken back. One of the biggest moments in The Dark Knight Rises comes from the pages of Batman issue 497, released back in 1993. So this was when we first met Bane in the comics, okay? Right during the Nightfall story arc. And he had just released every villain from Arkham Asylum, causing chaos to erupt in the streets of Gotham City. So poor Batman had to round up these super maniacs and throw them back in the slammer, but of course that's a pretty tiring job. So Bane expected this. In fact, he actually counted on it in order to strike the Dark Knight. See, Bane had found out Batman's identity and went over to his Batcave himself to settle the score. What a surprise. All these surprise door opens with paralyzing effects. Here we go. So the entire issue is basically Bane throwing Batman around, just one hit after another. It's brutal. And then finally, Bane grabbed Batman, explains out loud to Bruce how he could kill him, but then death would only end his agony and silence his shame. So instead, he simply breaks his entire back. And that's the last page of the issue. That's what they leave you on. You do this, and then you just see barcodes, and you're like, no way, no way.
Number 4, Spider-Man, a passenger in his own body. In the Superior Spider-Man, Peter's body is taken over by Dr. Octopus. Otto indeed does make for a superior Spider-Man, but he's definitely more cold, calculated, and bitter than good old Pete. The awful thing about this is Peter Parker is still alive somewhere inside of the body and can do nothing but watch as Otto dates his girlfriend MJ, builds up his company Parker Industries, and even alienates him from his friends with his new attitude and negative banter. Pete has to bear witness to it all, trapped in his own body, watching the course of his life go off in a new direction. Luckily, it's all kind of retconned and straightened out in the end, but man, definitely a troublesome time for Spidey.
Number 3, Tim Drake's torture. Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker animated film created by Tim and Paul Dini. We see the Joker and Harley kidnap Robin, okay? They kidnap him, they scoop him up off the streets while Tim was out one night patrolling the streets by himself, of course, as most heroes do, and then he sees a lady in trouble. This was of course the bait, and Tim sadly took it. It was all a setup, and it worked. So the Joker then trapped him and took him to Arkham Asylum, where he tortured him. I mean, the Joker straight up tortured him for 2 weeks. Yeah, this wasn't like an overnight thing. He didn't take a couple of fingers off. It's not like Ozark. This was 2 weeks of mental torture. He was brainwashed until eventually he gave up all these secrets about Batman. And then he eventually became this evil mini version of the Joker in the process, with the help of brainwashing and a microchip that carries the Joker's memories and consciousness with it. And as we see from other cases, brainwashing isn't a one and done event. Like Bucky Barnes, for example, he struggles with it constantly, like his life is over. But luckily Terry McGinnis ended up freeing Tim Drake, and then Tim went back to normal. But ooh, that therapy bill is gonna be hot. That's gonna be around for a while.
Number 2, Cyclops suffocates in a cube. When we first started this list, this scene was the first thing that I thought of. In Marvel's original Infinity Gauntlet storyline, after Thanos' universe-altering snap, the remaining Avengers head off into space to do battle against him. One of them is Cyclops, and in the scenes that follow, we see Thanos conjure an unbreakable cube around Cyclops' head, right when he is using an optic blast. Helpless, he falls to the ground, suffocating, as the heroes all around also fall to Thanos' incredible power. It's not only a devastating defeat, but almost an embarrassing and humiliating loss for the leader of the X-Men. A lot of heroes go down pretty fast up against Thanos, but it's the slow nature of Cyclops' death, just suffering in the background of the next few panels, that really drives this one home. Definitely one of the worst things to happen to a superhero.
And finally, number 1, you probably guessed it, Spider-Man gets his eye eaten. Okay, so this is perhaps one of the worst things that I can imagine. Like, I've seen Saw, I've seen all those movies. This is close. This is definitely close. Every time something happens with eyeballs, I always get goosebumps all over my shit. Okay, so in the Spider-Man storyline, The Other, Evolve or Die, we see Spider-Man go toe-to-toe with Morlun, and he gets his ass kicked. It gets so hard that Spider-Man actually breaks his knuckles while he's fighting. That's how intense this battle is. Okay, so things quickly go from bad to worse when Morlun decides to grab Spidey's left eye and pull it right out. No, he didn't, Spider-Man says. Oh, yes, he did, my friend. He pulled his eyeball out, and then to make us feel even more sick, Morlun eats it, even commenting how delicious it was. What a lovely meal. Nutritious and delicious, I must say. Don't forget to tip your server.